It's hard to believe, but her body really did become completely different. Opening her eyes and seeing her reflection, she suddenly realizes that she has become none other than Arusha Savlon. The eyes changed color. They became like the shimmering northern lights in the polar night. Such incredible purple hair has never been seen before. It clearly belongs to the famous heroine of the novel. Only Arusha has the charming appearance of a little girl that one cannot help but fall in love with. The problem is that she is a secondary character, thrown out onto the street along with her father. Although Arusha was not given a single line, her father played an important role at the very beginning of the novel. According to the plot, Marquis Savlon was the first heir of a wealthy family of a famous duke. He was tall and had a perfect physique, as if created by a brilliant sculptor. The Marquis showed no interest in girls and spent his entire day studying science. However, at the age of 22, he suddenly got married, although many doubted the sincerity of his feelings. When the Marquis's wife died after giving birth to a child, the young gentleman became a completely different person. One could say that life was divided into before and after, making the hero a real monster. He completely forgot about his child, indulging in strange amusements from morning until late evening. At some point, many of the hero's friends abandoned him, realizing that he had completely lost his mind. He becomes an ordinary, unbridled, and reckless fool who wants to spend his time idly. Having hit rock bottom, the Marquis begins to drown in alcohol, losing his original appearance. Such a way of life could lead to nothing but a tragic ending at the end of history. Marquis Savlon dies in a carriage accident, suffering unimaginable agony. Since her previous life was over anyway, it wasn't so bad to be reincarnated into the body of a duke's daughter. However, it would be better to become the daughter of a charismatic villain or emperor. Instead, she becomes the daughter of a fool whose name is erased from the family register. Looking again at her reflection, the girl suddenly realizes that she can come to terms with this. After all, in the guise of this cutie, you can remain a happy, carefree child for a long time. At this moment, the maid enters the children's room. She has been looking for the baby all over the house for a long time. A couple of years ago, Deborah volunteered to be a maid because Arusha is incredibly sweet. If she were in the girl's place, she would simply live in front of the mirror, looking at her beautiful reflection. The maid doesn't know that she will soon die if she can't change the plot of the novel. Deborah suggests going for a walk. They had been planning to go shopping together for a long time. It would be better if they met twice a week to go shopping together in the city center. The girl knows that she used the child to steal money behind the drinking gentleman's back. Although this was not the only reason why Arushi's family went completely bankrupt. Since she was reborn in such a novel, she must first survive. Arusha suddenly admits that she knows very well about Deborah's insidious plan to steal her father's money. Hearing this, the maid cannot understand where the child was able to get this information. Every lady she met constantly asked her about her father. The girl simply could not help but find out the truth. She warns that if Deborah is caught, she will be in big trouble. Even though her family considers her trash, at least her grandfather may treat her differently. Realizing that she had made a mistake, the maid tenderly takes the baby by the hands. She confesses to what she did, begging to be given just one chance to make amends and not hold a grudge. Right now, Deborah's grandmother is sick, and her treatment requires a lot of money that poor people don't have. Arusha has succumbed to other people's influence many times before and does not want to repeat it. However, she assures that the words spoken are the pure truth, and there is no point in her lying anymore. Unexpectedly, the girl promises to give her the necessary amount for treatment if the maid agrees to help. In the original story, Arusha was often neglected by her father and did not receive a proper education. She doesn't want Deborah to be thrown out of the house, but she needs something important from her. In response, she agrees to any request, as long as the girl doesn't tell her father everything. Today my grandfather is scheduled to visit, which means the day will be quite difficult. If nothing changes in the plot, Grandpa will kick Dad out of the house, and this cannot be allowed to happen. The maid is forced to admit that all of the Marquis's relatives want to kick him out. By the way, the girl has quite good speech for her age. This is the first time Deborah has encountered something like this. If she wants to live this life to the end, the girl is forced to adapt to everything anew. She admits that she can't do it without her grandfather's help. He, more than anyone else, should understand her feelings and persuade her dad to give up his bad habit. However, Arusha herself said that neither the Marquis nor his father showed the girl the attention she deserved. In that case, she must make her father and grandfather acknowledge her true talent. First of all, the girl should find a suitable teacher who can give her a good education. Since grandfather only favors smart grandchildren, it is necessary to make one's own contribution to the family business. It seems that these are exactly the words Deborah was waiting for from her. She promises to find a way to persuade the Marquise. Now we should meet him while the gentleman is still on his floor. The maids notice how much the girl's behavior has changed. She no longer looks like the scared little girl she was from the day she was born. Approaching her father's bedroom, the girl asks him to let her into the room and not stand in the way like a pillar. However, in response, the maid suggests not to disturb the master. She can very well convey the girl's words. Without listening to Helga, she quickly bursts into the room before the maid has time to grab her. It seems that the father did not expect such a sudden invasion. He had not yet finished the first bottle of wine. This kind of scene was quite predictable, but this time Arusha does not intend to tolerate it. The man doesn't want to see anyone, but we're talking about his own daughter. Looking at her, he understands how determined the girl is. It won't be so easy to get rid of her. Suddenly, the Marquis grabs her in his arms, although his gaze still does not inspire confidence. It doesn't look at all like how loving fathers take their own child into their arms. Turning around, the Marquis notices the maid, but there is another small creature with her. As the master had requested, Helga brought her pet with her, tying it with a beautiful bow. It's hard to imagine what might have happened if the maid and her dog hadn't been there. Looking at him, the girl begins to feel as if her dad loves his furry pet more than his daughter. Immediately after this, he orders Arusha to be taken away from here and put to bed. He's much more interested in playing with his dog Roro than listening to reproaches. This sweet creature seems to understand him without words. She has lived in the house for as long as Arusha has lived. For such treatment, I immediately want to hit my dad on the head with a slipper and slam the door. It's strange that today his daughter was so persistent and did not intend to let him go without an explanation. He doesn't want to know what she needs, but the servants will easily fulfill her request. Arusha suddenly admits that she no longer intends to waste time. If her genius is revealed to the visiting teachers, the girl will definitely not be thrown out of here. If we are talking about the teacher, the Marquis has long since said his last word. She has no idea what these teachers from the academy will teach Arush and what kind of stupid things the child will pick up. He explains that all the teachers of the ducal families are incredibly cruel people who always teach children the wrong things. She certainly doesn't want to suffer every day over homework and walk around with dark circles under her eyes. Besides, Dad doesn't advise her to go to that grumpy old man's lair. He won't teach her anything good either. She was prepared for such an answer, but she did not intend to leave the room without consent. At that moment, the girl hears the loud voice of her grandfather, who burst into the room without warning. He heard that the Marquis had recently knocked out the teeth of a famous count's son, and now the family business would be in trouble. In response, the Marquis assures that the boy himself asked for such a rude conversation. However, Duke Sherman is right. He really does not have the right to beat someone at his own discretion. It is strange that he does not consider this incident to be anything unusual and does not intend to apologize. Having calmed down a little, the Duke reminds us of the losses that the entire family will suffer if they lose their partner. He warned his son many times that his actions were constantly harming the family and jeopardizing his reputation. The family of Count Coulson, the father of the beaten boy, plays an important role in the Duke of Sherman's business. According to the plot, because of this event, the partnership was terminated, after which the grandfather fell ill. She must prevent this event, otherwise Arushi's own story will end sadly. Despite all the arguments, he continues to stand his ground, not admitting guilt to the young man. Unable to bear the insolence, the old man demands that he immediately change his behavior before it is too late. The assistant loudly asks for a stretcher to be brought into the room. Duke Sherman will not be able to walk. In response, he asks her to calm down. He was just a little nervous after talking with his son. Meanwhile, the Marquis always thought that his father was exaggerating too much. If Arusha wants to add anything, the young master asks that he do so right now. In response, the girl reminds them of the conversation they had before her grandfather arrived. Realizing that his daughter is serious about starting her education, he orders that a teacher be assigned to her. However, upon entering another room, he snaps at the servants, who again failed to carry out the order. The Marquis does not like it when his orders are treated carelessly and not taken seriously. It seems he forbade Arusha from entering his room, so how could the girl sneak in? Helga apologizes, but the girl's arrival also came as a big surprise to her. Until today, the little lady behaved differently. The young Duke should carefully consider the reason for such a sudden change of mood. She used to be one of those children who lived quietly and unnoticed. Like a little mouse, she was afraid to make an extra sound, agreeing to any orders. However, everything changed after that night, as if the girl woke up with new thoughts. The Duke decides to assign Arusha a low-ranking teacher so that he will not be able to teach the child anything. We need a young, untalented student who doesn't like to work hard and avoids his work. However, the assistant can simply bribe any teacher by giving him the necessary order. If you think about it, the little girl's words reminded you of what happened to the Duke in the distant past. She certainly wouldn't bother him if he simply fulfilled her request by bringing the teacher into the house. The next morning, loud voices are heard throughout the house. Arusha understands that this news is unlikely to please her, judging by the noisy commotion. Seeing the maid, she immediately asks not to throw her out of the house if Deborah came with this intention. To the little girl's surprise, the news was that the Earl Coulson family was breaking their contract with her grandfather. This sound, coming from the first floor, could be considered the ringing of bells at her funeral. Everything was fine with my grandfather. The doctor just advised him to rest a little and come to his senses. In addition, Count Coulson became very angry and demanded a large sum of money as compensation. And now the maid offers her breakfast if she is ready to get out of bed. It's a pity, but the amount of compensation could have been enough to buy several golden mansions. If she does nothing and lets the business fall apart, she risks not surviving until the end. Arusha decides to immediately go to his father. He is the only one who can fix the situation. Finding herself opposite the bedroom, she suddenly sees the annoying maid again. Helga asks the girl to stop. Her father has not yet woken up and will not tolerate intrusion. According to the maid, even at 10 in the morning, the Duke is in a deep sleep. She explains that lately the gentleman gets up when the sun is high in the sky. Gradually, the girl begins to understand who will become the evil heroine in this story. In any case, the Marquis will be against her meeting with the Pope. He has already given the servants all the orders. Helga asks not to come to the master's room until he himself calls Arusha to him. It's a shame that he can't listen to the wishes of his only daughter at least once. Looking Helga straight in the eyes, she asks him to explain what is causing this strange behavior. The girl just wanted to know why her dad decided to hit a stranger. Perhaps the uncle really did do something for which he ultimately deserved the Marquise's punishment. The maid quickly turns away, unable to find what to answer. After a short time, Deborah asks her not to worry. She will find out everything from the maids she knows. Unlike Helga, this maid claims to be the good heroine of the novel. The only problem is that the master's sleep patterns are too unpredictable, so we'll have to wait. However, she still has some time to fix the plot. Helga is a little hesitant. The Marquis had already been on his feet for a long time and was getting ready for breakfast. But this time, a small surprise awaits him again, and the servants face severe punishment. The girl was here again. She was cheerfully wishing her dad a good mood on this wonderful day. The naive dad doesn't know that Arusha can slip past any obstacle. This is not the first time the Duke has had to scold his servants. Just yesterday, he forbade his daughter from being allowed in here. It's a shame to hear such words from her dad, but the girl was just a little hungry. She wants to have breakfast with him. There is some space at the common table. Without wasting any time, she asks for a fork before her dad changes his mind about having breakfast with her. Still, the Duke orders them to return to their place immediately, since they discussed everything yesterday. It's hard to believe that he's willing to so unceremoniously send his daughter away without even feeding the baby. If she came again to talk about the teacher, he should not be bothered with this chatter. Luckily, Dad had already chosen a suitable teacher, so he fulfilled her wish. And now important matters await him. The Marquis asks to quickly have dinner and go to his room. There are no dessert utensils, so you'll have to use a dessert fork. It feels like food tastes so much better when you eat with your dad. It was hard to remember the last time Duke Marquis sat next to her like this. At this moment, she remembers the incident with the Count's son. His father probably beat him for his misdeed. She is sure that her grandfather misunderstood everything, blaming the Marquis for everything. He replies that such conversations should not be held in the presence of little girls. Arusha is afraid to even imagine what will happen if her grandfather decides to kick her dad out. The Duke admits that if the old man suddenly dies, the whole family will only get better. However, he will definitely be against it if they die along with their grandfather. In the original story, both die tragically in a carriage accident after being expelled from the mansion. Someone clearly conspired against them, otherwise it would be impossible to explain so many coincidences. Ignoring his other capable sons, Old Man Sherman appoints his young grandson Oscar as his heir. But everything could have worked out if not for the actions of one eccentric gentleman. The one who started this tragedy is sitting right in front of her and is Arushi's biological father. The Marquis believes that it is her grandfather who is forcing him to die. He is deliberately leading him to the edge. It's a pity that Arusha can't tell everything directly, otherwise the ending would happen even faster. The Marquis doesn't need the fame and wealth of this family at all. They only create a lot of problems. Instead, the young Duke dreams of a quiet life, like a normal, happy person. It seems as if he would be only too happy if his father kicked him out of the mansion. This day will be the first free day in his life, leading the Duke to self-realization. In many ways, he is right in forgetting about his daughter, who will be forced to die first. After some time, the Marquis orders the servants to bring more drinks here. That's right, her father is not a charismatic tyrant or a hero who deserves glory. Arusha is destined to help her father, from whom it is impossible to get even a drop of support. The girl demands that milk be brought to her, and it would be better if her dad followed her example. She decides to make him behave like a human being, otherwise life will not be long and happy. Having waited for her healthy drink, the girl drinks the entire glass of milk in one gulp. At this moment, the doors of the dining room open noisily. Someone has sent their secretary into the house. The young man apologizes for the sudden visit, but Duke Sherman has already given orders. Nocturne doesn't want to interfere in family matters. He's just doing his duty. He is obliged to read this out loud, even though he understands how unpleasant it is for the Marquis to hear such a thing. Without listening to the secretary, he asks to immediately leave the mansion and return to the old man. He should think carefully before returning to this house again. Arusha understands perfectly well that her grandfather intends to take the estate from her father. The crazy old man will do anything to remove his eldest son from the family business. Meanwhile, Arusha would never agree to leave this wonderful place. The young master explains that no one but him is capable of managing it. He considers himself the legal owner of the estate and its sole manager. And now, Nocturne must go back and convey the Marquis's answer to the old man word for word. A bit of a strange statement, since 5 minutes ago he expressed a desire to be expelled from the family. Compared to this place, the place where she lived before her reincarnation was just a miserable shack. The secretary would not object to the gentleman, although he has his own personal opinion. He asks once again to obey his father's order, although it will be quite difficult for the Duke. If he continues to be stubborn, Duke Sherman will find a way to quickly calm him down. The old man promises to cut the budget for the Marquis's estate from today. It seems like someone won't have enough money for drinks, but milk will be fine. In that case, if the move would help his father recover, the Marquis would obey this time. However, this debt to his father will be his last. He will never again receive a drop of pity. The words sounded like a threat, but the Marquis was certainly capable of carrying them out. Perhaps Duke Sherman should have cut back on his alcoholic son's spending much earlier. Otherwise, he would have spent his entire life selling family heirlooms and artifacts, as was the case in the original. And now, after talking with Nocturne, the girl has a chance to carry out her plan. In a few days, they arrive at the new house. The Marquis will have to do without many excesses. For some reason, it seems to him that the new house is too squalid for normal living. Although, first of all, you need to think about the most important thing, not forgetting about your daughter. Perhaps this grown man will never stop being selfish. Arusha decides to calm him down a little. He can't wander around the house aimlessly all day. If he can change Count Coulson's mind, grandfather will definitely return the estate back. All the benefits to which the Marquis was so accustomed could return to him that same day. Arusha offers to apologize to the Count for the incident with his son Joseph. A second later, the Marquis makes it clear that the scoundrel will not receive an apology from him. He behaves so furiously with his little daughter, as if what is happening has completely clouded his mind. The Marquis is convinced that one should only apologize when one has allowed oneself to do something bad. But that case with the Count's child is special. The boy himself was really to blame for the fight. Anticipating something terrible, the maid decides to intervene. The young Duke is clearly not himself. The unfortunate child fell under the hot hand of his father, and it is strange that Arusha does not even cry. Instead, she assures Deborah that she is perfectly fine, better than ever. After all, no one can learn to live again overnight. Deborah can indeed help her, but only in a slightly different way. There is another plan to persuade the father to make a decision. To do this, they come to the very place where, not long ago, the father had a fight with the Count's son. This place is one of the best clubs for large social events. It should be quiet now. Deborah suggests, doing everything quickly and hiding immediately. In response, she thanks the maid for agreeing to help her, otherwise the plan would not have worked. Looking at the sweet girl's inspiration, she admits that she is ready to do anything for the young lady. It would be better if Deborah never knew what this imaginary fun was about. She just wants to survive, which is why she uses every opportunity. Luckily, they manage to enter the building, but inside things are much more complicated. The Arushas do not believe that a little girl would come to such a place in search of her father. There is only one way to quickly win their favor, by shedding light on the truth. The child suddenly takes off his hood and radiates so much light, as if he had just descended from the heavens. Taking a closer look, they recognize the girl as a young lady from a famous family. It looks like this child really does have connections in high society. The girl thanks the lady for visiting their modest establishment, but there are no members of her family in the room. At the same time, there is another famous child nearby, accustomed to being in the shadows all his life. Arusha tries to convince them that their father has changed a lot since the last incident. However, the wealthy drunkard who beat the man was well known to everyone. The girl asks him to tell her what he knows about the fight with the Count's son. Suddenly, Stuart changes his tone and rudely demands that Irish get out of here. Such rudeness cannot be tolerated, the boy advises watching one's language in the presence of a lady. Regardless of her father's mistakes, Stuart must be polite to a child of distinguished birth. This promising boy actually decided to stand up for Arusha in the midst of the conflict. It's hard to understand why he's protecting a girl he's seeing for the first time in his life. Approaching her, the stranger warns that Arusha should not be here unattended. In response, she thanks him for his help, but she still has something very important to do. Without waiting, the boy approaches her as if he himself has bad intentions. He insistently demands that they stop wandering around aimlessly and return to the house immediately. Marquis Savlon has too many enemies, she must remember that. With these words, he leaves the room, leaving everyone completely bewildered. Judging by his level, he is one of the two main characters that Arusha meets a little later. Realizing that the situation needs to be rectified, Stuart offers to tell her about the fight with Joseph. If she promises to keep this information secret, the young man is ready to tell everything. Of course, she needs this information, otherwise why would Arusha come here? In the end, he tells the girl everything that he saw with his own eyes. Meanwhile, Duke Sherman's secretary returns to his estate. Nocturne tells us that recently the young gentleman himself decided to leave the mansion. Fortunately, he didn't even have to be kicked out. The Marquis made this decision voluntarily. He does not advise Duke Sherman to personally go to the Coulson family. This undertaking is very dangerous. However, now that it's a business contract, the old man decides to close the incident with honor. As a child, Marquis was always a wonderful child. His father was proud of his eldest son. There was no one in the whole house who could boast of such intelligence and abilities. It was 5 years ago, at a time when he was not married and had not experienced tragedy. With all due respect to Lady Juliet, the Duke cannot revive her. The remnants of the past must be forgotten. Neither the Marquis nor his daughter had any hope left because of their father's constant drunkenness. Thinking about his son every day, the old man had already decided that he could not help in any way. The young secretary is forced to apologize, but he had long been inclined to think exactly the same. After some thought, the Duke orders a family meeting to be held after his personal visit to the Coulsons. There is no place for useless things in the house. It's time to get rid of the accumulated junk. A few days later, Nocturne again goes to visit the young Duke. A terrible noise in the street makes Helga urgently run to the window. This could wake up the Marquis. However, the Marquis himself wakes up from a strange sound, not understanding what is happening on the street. Apologizing for the sudden visit, the maid wishes the young master a good day. She knows that the Marquis's father nevertheless decided to personally visit Joseph and his father. Duke Sherman plans to visit their estate, but this time not empty-handed. It seems the old man still cares about his pride, although at his age it's time to think about something else. A maid can set the table in the banquet hall if the master so wishes. A great idea, if Helga remembers to bring a bottle of strong alcohol with her. The sight of a poor family in such a deplorable state makes one drink only strong drinks. Going downstairs, the Marquis suddenly notices a strange door at the end of the room. Realizing that the door is locked, he asks the maid to find a way to open it. At the same time, the gifts for Count Coulson's family were ready. All that remained was to present them as a sign of apology. If Duke Sherman has other orders, Nocturne is ready to carry them out right now. This time the old man will not be accompanied by his son. The Marquis flatly refused to apologize. Apparently, Duke Sherman will still be left alone to answer for his grown-up child. As he climbs into the carriage, the old man already knows how this meeting will end for the Marquise. By his absence, he further disgraces the family, leaving his father alone with the Count. Suddenly, right in front of him, he sees a little girl waiting for him in a carriage. Arusha reports that Dad is sick today, so they are going to Count Coulson's family's house together. The old man warns that he is not used to sharing his carriage with anyone else. Moreover, the young, impudent girl can relieve some of the responsibility from her father. The girl decides to act a little more boldly, stretching out her fragile hand to her grandfather. Looking straight into his eyes, she admits that she missed him very much. In response, he orders them to get rid of the girl and immediately go to the Count's mansion. To be honest, she had foreseen such a reaction, but she hoped to be able to convince her grandfather. Once in the past, he treated the girl differently, seeing his granddaughter for the first time in his life. Arusha still remembers the kind, radiant smile that the old man gave to his granddaughter. After a quarrel with his son, their relationship gradually began to cool, turning the grandfather against his granddaughter. Watching him go, she realizes that she needs to find a way to get to the Count's estate. If Arusha doesn't follow them, she risks repeating the dramatic path of the original heroine. What happened became an unforgettable story, passed down among the servants of the estate. This jump can easily be called Arusha Savlon's most glamorous debut. Having asked her servants for help, the girl rushed after her grandfather with one long jump. It's hard to believe, but the girl actually managed to catch the carriage and eventually ended up at the estate. Landing on the coachman's seat after the throw, the girl followed Duke Sherman. Arusha promises that she won't tell anyone about this, but she also wants to apologize. If a dad hits someone, at least his own daughter is obliged to apologize instead of him. It was a brave move, but the Duke remained confident that it was unnecessary. One old man bowing his head because of her father's recklessness would be enough. And yet, by going with him, Arusha will be able to tell the truth she heard yesterday. In this case, people will start to treat Dad a little better, and some will even start to respect him. At the same time, the young Duke was able to enter the room locked by his daughter. Once inside, he sees before him a whole warehouse of toys, neatly arranged on the shelves. Helga is forced to admit that most of these toys were brought in from the street by the servants. Hearing this, the Marquis decides to immediately throw all this trash back into the trash. He orders the toys to be burned, and that the servants are not allowed to carry out such orders in the future. Finally, the Count receives at the estate a gentleman who has come to apologize for his son. The Count demands to look closely at his boy's face, but he has not yet been married. Besides his disfigured face, his entire body is covered in bruises left by the drunken Duke. Every time he sees his face, tears flow from his eyes on their own. The old man knows very well that mental wounds are the hardest to heal, which is why he is here. But he still asks to accept a modest gift in order to ease the Count's anger just a little. I must say, after seeing the contents of the chest, Joseph felt noticeably better. He recalls that after the incident and all the humiliations, the Marquis did not send a single letter. In the future, he will have to appear in front of the ladies often. How will the old man compensate for the damage? Even if Duke Sherman had 10 mouths to feed, he still wouldn't have found an answer. For this purpose, he has prepared many different gifts, although he can do something else if Joseph wishes. Finally, the young man admits that his mood has improved dramatically. He plans to meet the Duke again in the future when the money runs out. At this point, Arusha declares that there is enough money to pay off all the accumulated debts. It's about a card debt that his beloved daddy doesn't know about yet. That evening, Stuart did indeed tell about Joseph swindling her father out of money. After a fight with the Marquis, the young man tried to blackmail the young Duke. Having lost his entire fortune at the casino, Joseph was looking for a way to compensate for his losses. Apparently, he himself wanted to fall during the fight, placing all the blame on the Marquis. The Marquis can indeed be quite hot-tempered, but there is no doubt that he was provoked. It turns out that the young man really got what he deserved, and her father turned out to be just a victim. That evening, the little girl learned a lot of things that had remained in the shadows for a long time. And now, standing opposite the Count, she is ready to repeat this story, word for word. As expected, Count Coulson considers the story too outdated. Their boy is no longer a player. Just recently, he promised his father that he would give up gambling once and for all. Joseph was broke, but there was a gentleman who agreed to lend him a large sum of money. Arusha offers to return the property mortgaged by the Count's son right now. To do this, they should go there right now. All the evidence is already there. Judging by his appearance, Joseph will no longer be able to hide the truth from his own father. While no one is listening, the secretary manages to report a few more details of the case. Everything becomes too obvious. Joseph doesn't even try to deny his guilt. Arusha agrees that her father beat many people, but this time he is not to blame for what happened. He was simply used for selfish purposes. The grandfather is obliged to believe his son at least once. Usually, Duke Sherman does not change his mind, but now he decides otherwise. When addressing the Count, the old man does not at all try to take back the apologies he made. However, if his son really had such intentions, that changes the matter. The Duke is not prepared to turn a blind eye to the fraud committed by Joseph. The things he brought belong to Sherman, but these two can use them. If Count Coulson wants to change the terms of the contract, the old man will be waiting for his visit to the estate. After waiting for the Duke to leave, the young man falls to the floor, fully aware of what awaits him. His father does not forgive such things. The Count's punishment is much more terrible than mere words. Perhaps after a conversation with his father, Joseph will get a couple more holes in his teeth. This time, a small child provided assistance comparable to that of an experienced adult. Nocturne suggests facing the truth. The Duke's granddaughter's actions are worthy of admiration. The old man thinks this is complete nonsense. The little one didn't help him one bit. Having seen what Duke Sherman saw, he certainly would not have been able to repeat his words. Still, he decides to postpone the family gathering planned for the weekend for a while. No one said that the Duke intended to abandon his own son with his little granddaughter. A short time later, the girl wakes up in a carriage in which there is no one left. She quickly recalls the experience, realizing that the first round of a long struggle was hers. However, the worst news was still to come for the little one, otherwise Deborah would not have been so worried. She is very sorry to say this, but recently the Marquis took all her toys from her room. Meanwhile, the Marquis himself already meets an old friend whom he has not seen for a long time. Kroby spent too much time on vacation, forgetting about work and the bustle of the city. He had already heard the latest news and was sure that the Marquis was lucky to be left in the ducal family. The old man could have easily expelled him, but in the end it all ended with a simple move. In response, the Marquis warns that he will not tolerate his insolent speeches for too long. For some reason, Kroby is sure that he is the best worker, who is profitable to keep around. Of course, if the young Duke cares about a worthy reward, he will work tirelessly. Kroby was the one person the Marquis truly valued. This guy knows that his friend doesn't care about the opinions of others. He always has his own. In his next life, he wants to be as confident and handsome as the Marquis. The Marquis himself does not fully believe that anyone else is capable of achieving the same perfection. At this moment, the friend hears a voice. It sounds like a clean spring breeze. It would be better if Kroby found something to hide behind for the Duke. His daughter is about to come in here. The doors swing open and the main heroine of the day appears before them. Raising her head, she suddenly sees in front of her a funny guy, always walking around doing nothing. Kroby asks to do without formalities. The baby has long become his own. With such a tiny hand like this child's, it's scary to even touch Arusha. Unlike him, the Marquis is not at all afraid to touch her. The main thing is not to break her shoulder. Addressing his daughter, the Marquis again warns that unannounced visits are prohibited. She acts as spoiled as her father, but the Marquis doesn't like to tolerate that. Kroby again wants to intervene, reminding him that his friend needs to change his attitude. At this point, the Marquis announces that he got rid of all the dirty cotton balls this morning. These lumps were recently my daughter's toys, which were carefully carried by the maids. He hopes that the girl will understand this act correctly and will not be angry with him. However, if she wants to cry, let her do it somewhere else. Even after this, the girl considers her father not such a bad person. However, if Kroby agrees to help her, it could benefit both of them in the future. Finally, she asks her father to respect other people's privacy, especially when it comes to relatives. Having said these words, the girl runs out of the room, loudly slamming the heavy door. Well, the negligent daddy has a lot to do before his daughter forgives him. Seriously, was it really possible to throw away your daughter's toys without her knowledge? The girl had already been through a lot lately. He had to be lenient. In fact, Arusha is not at all angry about the discarded toys. The one who treasured children's toys so much was the real Arusha Savlon, and not she at all. If this child is still here, she will undoubtedly be very upset to learn of its disappearance. When she enters the room, she seems to mentally address the original heroine. It seems to her as if the real heroine is now fast asleep somewhere nearby. In that case, one can be completely sure that everything will soon change in her ducal family. She will be able to create a place where Arusha can live a decent life. Suddenly, the door of the room opens and Deborah enters again without knocking. Of course, it is a great happiness to see her, although the maid is sure that the lady needs help. She must be very upset after the incident with the discarded toys. However, she has great news. Her grandfather's contract will be preserved and left unchanged. Furthermore, the compensation was fully refunded, meaning the Duke is now very pleased. This is truly excellent news. The girl has received a worthy reward for her work. She had already asked her father many times to send a teacher, and today the teacher was here. Limerick is pleased to meet the young lady, although he behaves too shyly. Having received her education, she is confident that Arusha will soon be recognized as a true genius. Suddenly, Limerick announces that from that day on they will play tag together. In addition, next week he promises to prepare a playhouse for Arushi. Realizing that he had understood everything incorrectly, she asks him to solve complex equations in class. Instead of playing tag, she should be studying science and preparing for the academy. It becomes clear almost immediately that the young man is a common swindler. As a result, the fair-haired teacher skipped the next lesson, avoiding classes. For a long time, Arusha tried to find him in the garden, but he had already left the estate. Suddenly, she notices in the distance someone who looks very much like the escaped amateur. Having jumped out of hiding, the girl only at the last second realizes that she was mistaken. Instead of the careless teacher, Nocturne was wandering around here for some reason, not expecting such a meeting. She asks to tell her which way the guy who looked like him ran. Instead of answering, Nocturne suddenly asks not to make noise. The lady should not forget where they are. It turned out that all this time, Duke Sherman had been waiting for the secretary, having found a secluded place in the shadows. The secretary asks him to forgive him. He was slightly distracted from his work, but is ready to continue. Not noticing his granddaughter, the old man decides to recall that incident at the Count's estate involving Arushi. The mere thought of the incident still causes the Duke pangs of pain. However, let's get down to business today. He is waiting for an official response from Arta Castle. From the conversation, Arusha understands that they are talking about an elite academy, which she wants to enter. It's hard to tell who exactly they're discussing, but it concerns some boy. At this point, the old man loses patience. The academy has long since lost its former greatness. They refused Oscar only because there was a criminal in his family, forgetting about honor and justice. Only now does she understand which Oscar her grandfather means. It must be said that the Arte Castle is the best educational institution in the entire empire. In the original, the Savlon family was eager to see their grandson attend the Academy of True Geniuses. The bad news is that, according to the plot, Old Man Sherman dies before Oscar arrives. Although in this situation the news is the saddest for Arushi. Nocturne promises to look into this and will send an official letter with a note of protest. It is important not to catch the grandfather's eye after hearing this. The girl will definitely be kicked out of the family. Before writing a reply, the secretary humbly asks him to calm down and think it over carefully. To help the old man let off some steam, Nocturne even opened a training hall. No matter how angry he was, the Duke was obliged to maintain order and not make the situation worse. Her heart almost stopped from fear, but the girl was able to wait until her grandfather left. Nocturne warns that the garden is an important place where the Duke reflects on important things. Therefore, she should leave this place immediately, otherwise she will have to face her grandfather. Finally, she wants to know what she needs to do to be recognized as a member of the Savlon family. The question is quite difficult, but since the little one asked directly, it needs to be answered. If she can get into the Genius Academy before Oscar gets in, maybe she'll have a chance. Without even listening to Nocturne to the end, Arusha asks only to wait a little while she gets ready. It is worth remembering that she always accomplishes what she plans if she takes the matter seriously. Very soon, news spreads everywhere about the young lady's imminent admission to the academy. Upon learning of this, Kroby decides to ask the Marquis himself whether the rumors about his daughter are true. In response, he asks not to think too much. His friend runs in front of the carriage. The teacher he hired will not seriously teach the girl. A lot of money was paid for this. If he were a loyal mercenary of the ducal family, the teacher would not have agreed to this request. Without even waiting for the carriage to come to a complete stop, the Marquis jumps out of the carriage while it is still moving. His friend asks him to explain the reason for such a strange rush. This place looks like an ordinary toy store. Did the young Duke decide to remember his childhood? Even if he jumped out of the carriage to buy something for his daughter, the act was too absurd. The store always welcomes new guests. All toys are truly unique. It's easy to imagine the way the store staff looks at hurried customers. These two act as if they have never been to a toy store in their lives. Since they've already arrived, Kroby suggests sweeping everything clean, making Arusha happy. The Marquis could very well buy out all the goods in the store, but that's not why he came here. My daughter's room is really missing toys, especially after the latest incident. By giving her one toy of each kind, the girl will be delighted. Yet one specimen attracts his attention more than all the others. This doll resembles her daughter so much, it's as if the artist made a sketch based on Arushi. Looking at it, Kroby advises not to hesitate and just buy this lovely toy. He hopes that one day he too will have a daughter as sweet as the Marquise's. In that case, he can give her this doll himself. The Marquis has no intention of wasting time. A strange reaction, considering that the young Duke jumped out of the carriage to make a purchase. His departure has been long awaited. The Marquise has a rather bad reputation in the city. A second later, one of the two young guests appears next to her again. Kroby asks you not to be afraid. He just wanted to ask for something, if it won't be a burden to anyone. The next day turns out to be very successful for the girl. She finds a teacher again. Missing Limerick teacher is back with student. She is grateful for this decision. However, it is difficult to understand whether Limerick really made the decision to return home on his own. Arusha reminds him that only this estate can guarantee him a high salary. This means I need to quickly pick up my pen and begin a lesson with the future academy student. At this moment, it becomes clear that the young man is not so simple. He has no intention of giving in to violence, even if Arusha starts to mock him. Suddenly, a maid appears behind. All this time, she was standing next to the door of the room. She may well be able to help the young lady convince the intractable teacher. It feels like the thirst for knowledge is something bad, but the girl just wants to study. They don't ask too much of him. Arusha needs a mentor to prepare for admission. After some thought, she decides to do something different by looking into her work briefcase. The portfolio will likely contain information about where the teacher actually works. Rummaging through his briefcase, the first thing Arusha discovers is a comprehensive workbook. Then a progress report file and a notebook of incorrect answers fall out of there. Finally, she notices an introduction to preschool education written in the same handwriting. He quickly explains that the documents are intended for one elementary school student, but the main thing is that the girl was able to read the titles of the documents on her own. Since all the cards are on the table, the girl suggests doing something that will finally convince him. Arusha promises to complete all the tasks in these notebooks in exactly 30 minutes. If she keeps her promise, he should promise in return to help her prepare for the exams. Having received consent to the deal, the girl immediately frees Limerick. The young man recalls rumors that the girl lived like a recluse from birth. In this case, it will take at least 1 year to teach the girl letters and arithmetic. What is unusual about this situation is that a 5-year-old child has the concentration of an adult. If you believe that she is able to master so many topics in just a few days, her stamina is amazing. The teacher will have to acknowledge Arusha as a genius if she really succeeds. 30 minutes later, they suddenly hear her tired voice, the girl announcing the completion of the tasks. Incredibly, all the tasks that Limerick had at his disposal were completed. It is unclear why the Duke's family's precious daughter is so desperate to enter the academy. She can do without it just fine, just having fun and leading an idle life. Limerick asks to answer honestly whether there is a hidden reason for Arushi's intentions. The girl replies that she just wants to see a smile on her beloved dad's face more often. Someday she will bring glory to her family's name, and Duke Marquis will be able to be proud of his daughter. In that case, there is no point in checking the work. Limerick has already made a decision. If he understands everything correctly, the girl wants to get into the Academy of Geniuses by any means necessary. She has the wonderful opportunity of having a former graduate of this academy as a teacher. She is truly lucky because Arusha will be prepared for admission by an elite teacher. Limerick promises to do everything to ensure that she becomes a student at the academy in 3 years. Preparations should begin today, and in 3 years she will fulfill her cherished wish. The minimum age for admission to the academy is 8 years. No matter how smart the applicant is, at 5 years old she simply won't be allowed to take the exam. Everything was fine until this moment, but the latest news greatly upsets the child. She became so nervous that she eventually lost consciousness in front of the teacher. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a secret meeting is taking place that will change a lot. The Crown Prince asks them to make sure that no one is following them. They should be careful. The assistant checked everything several times. His Highness can be completely calm. He has already selected 3 people who fully meet the stated requirements. There is one girl among them, but she has not yet reached the minimum age of 8 years. In response, the Crown Prince explains how insignificant age is when it comes to geniuses. He intends to gather all the best representatives of families in the Academy of Geniuses as soon as possible. The shadow looming over the Imperial Palace would reveal itself much sooner than they expected. This will be a threat to the entire empire, but Crown Prince Elliot's mastery of magic was not in vain. Meanwhile, Arusha was carried into the room when the baby suddenly wanted to rest. It's strange, but even in the room she hears voices. It was too noisy around. Opening her eyes, she sees a huge toy above her, a gift the servants had brought just recently. Helga explains that the gentleman decided to completely renovate her children's room, buying a lot of toys. Now the servants are placing them in the cabinets, and soon the little girl will be able to examine them herself. There are many toys here for every taste. You can choose animals or wind-up dolls. The small problem was that the girl had not yet had time to change her clothes. The servants had to knock on the door. Only now do they realize that they made a big mistake by forgetting about decency. Thus, the maids embarrassed the mistress so much that she shrank into a small ball. Finally, Deborah directly demands that they leave the room if the mistress's hint alone is not enough. Arusha can easily examine these toys herself. She doesn't need anyone's help at all. After waiting for the maids to leave, the girl decides to begin the operation, armed with scissors. Deborah is sure that such people don't even deserve to look at the little lady. By the way, the maid learned that Limerick often met with his acquaintances from the Academy of Geniuses. He told me to tell him that he would soon come to the mansion if he found something worthwhile. The most beautiful toys given by the Marquis are indeed decorated with precious stones. The toys that were previously in the children's room seemed too shabby, although they probably kept the memory of how the little lady enjoyed playing with them. Without listening to the maid, the girl hands her a bag with cut-off jewelry. Deborah has helped her so much in the last few days, she deserves to be rewarded. The maid not only took care of the girl, but also fulfilled difficult requests without hesitation. Now it's worth remembering the promise about her grandmother's expensive treatment. By selling the jewelry, the maid can easily pay for a quick recovery. Barely holding back her tears, she promises to remember the kindness of the young lady for the rest of her life. By the way, besides toys with expensive decorations, there is also a simple little doll. It is no wonder that the Duke liked this doll so much when he saw it on the shelf. She really does resemble Arusha very much, and it is quite possible to leave her without surgery. Having finished with this, the girl decides to visit her father. He should be in his room. The trouble is that the Duke is back to his old ways, emptying bottles of wine. It's hard to remember yesterday the Marquis hasn't been this drunk for a long time. At that moment, he notices a familiar toy left by his daughter in his room. Now it is clear that its owner must be somewhere here. He was not mistaken. Arusha has been waiting for her father to wake up for a long time so that they can celebrate a wonderful day together. She thanks her dad for the new toys. They could very well decorate her nursery. However, the Marquis himself does not remember giving her all these toys. It looks like Kroby did it without permission. The Marquis wouldn't do such nonsense. He only remembers how he ordered that just one doll be given to the girl, wanting to at least cheer her up a little. However, he then suddenly changes his mind, ordering his servants to buy the most expensive toys. In the end, these are just children's toys. There is nothing special about them. Yesterday, Marquis only briefly looked into the store, and this is what it turned into. Now, Arushi's children's room is littered with toys, although he had emptied it just recently. No matter how drunk he was, the Marquis had to keep his mind clear. It's all because of that idiot Kroby. He was the one who incited the Duke to give a gift to his daughter. At this moment, he suddenly sees Juliet in front of him, although the girl's mother had long since passed away. It's time to stop drinking to the point where you start hallucinating. The girl decides to remind about the issue that she still needs a teacher. The man cannot continue the conversation right now. It is worth postponing it until tomorrow. It's a pity that even after the contract was saved, it remained the same. Arusha does not intend to give up, declaring that she will remember her dad by playing with these wonderful dolls. It's hard to understand what happened to him yesterday, but these toys are absolutely adorable. By the way, she has already come up with a name for the most beautiful doll. The girl thinks they have the same eye color and very similar hairstyles. Looking at his daughter, the Marquis begins to seriously think about future changes in his life. He can't ignore his baby's love forever. The Marquis admits to the child that it is too dangerous to constantly remember his mother. Juliet spent only 2 days with her from the moment Irushi was born, after which she left forever. Having said these words, the Duke asks to be left alone for a while so that he can recover from yesterday. That arrogant dad stopped again in the middle of a story about her mother. But information about Juliet is really very important for the heroine. Irushi's biological mother and the family's second daughter lived a dignified, albeit short, life. The novel does not explain why the Marquis turned into a good-for-nothing alcoholic man. Kroby arrived just in time. She wanted to ask for one favor. He is confident that his personal assistant is the best person to understand her father's affairs. He hardly expected that the question would concern her mother. The girl knew about their divorce. If Mom hated Dad, what exactly made her turn against the Marquis? Of course, the young man is not ready for a serious adult conversation with a small child. Still, if she was serious about finding out the truth, they should take a little walk down the street. Marriages between aristocrats are often arranged to unite two families. We are talking about arranged marriages that benefit both families and strengthen the bond. However, in this sense, the Marquis and Juliet were special. Their marriage was not forced. They got married out of deep, mutual love, as anyone who has seen a couple in love can confirm. But when Arusha was born, her grandfather urgently needed help from a certain family. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of a rift between the lovers, which led to a falling out. As a result, Duke Sherman achieved the marriage of the daughter of that family and his fourth son. The main problem was that this family was at odds with Juliet's blood relatives. Upon learning of this, Juliet demanded a divorce to prevent a war between the families. In that case, Arusha wants to understand whether Dad tried to get Mom back. He admits that every time he came to his ex-wife's house, the Duke was driven away with shouts. The Marquis disregarded his father's orders and continued to suffer humiliation. As a result, after Juliet's death, his relatives did not even allow him to attend the funeral ceremony. Her grandfather and the Cartier family took things too far, which led to their current relationship. This often happens between two feuding families. Although even Duke Sherman did not expect that Juliet would leave this world so suddenly. Thus, due to the head of the family setting priorities, the Marquis loses his wife forever. Even if this decision made the family one of the strongest in the empire, the price was prohibitive. It was a shame that she had to touch on such a difficult topic, but Kroby only answered her question honestly. He hopes that the girl won't tell her dad about their conversation. At this moment, the maid reports the arrival of a reply from Master Limerick. The letter is in the room. Limerick managed to arrange a meeting at Arte Castle, and Arusha will soon be able to visit this place. As they parted, the young man once again begged her not to tell her father anything if she didn't want Kroby to die. However, he worries in vain. The girl does not want to reveal her main source at all. From the conversation, it becomes clear that the Marquis was rudely separated from his beloved, destroying his happiness. Gradually, he became a scumbag, abandoning his ideal image and status as heir. This means that now she needs to find a way to restore its former appearance, returning it to its former greatness. Then he will be able to once again gain the recognition of his grandfather, who puts the interests of the family first. The girl intends to ensure that her father can live a peaceful life, and his child along with him. A few days later, Limerick accompanies Arusha to Arte Castle for an interview. Now is not the time to think about anything else first. I need to get the consent of one strict lady. Problems should be dealt with as they arise, without forgetting the main thing. Once inside the office, the girl happily greets Madame, hoping that she did not catch her off guard. Madame Grant sees for the first time the very girl whom Teacher Limerick called a true prodigy. The girl is quite sweet, but Madame Grant sees no trace of the elegance that is characteristic of aristocrats. She explains that Arte Castle is renowned for more than just providing up-to-date information. In addition, their academy provides a personalized curriculum for each student. If she is serious about joining them, she must have all the necessary merits. More importantly, both parents must be present for Irushi to enroll in the educational institution. However, Madame Grant had already heard that the sweet girl had no mother, which complicated matters. Only mothers can be members of the parents' committee, so it is easier for them to exchange information. It's a pity, but if Arusha has nothing more to say, Madame Grant hopes that they have understood each other. Limerick decides to intervene. A child cannot be rejected simply because the mother is absent. Instead of explanations, the lady asks to end this conversation and leave the office. Thus, the visit to the academy ends in complete disappointment. Going out into the corridor, the teacher suggests asking the Marquise to help with her escort. Arusha is sure that he will not agree. Even training with a teacher has to be kept secret. Even if they agree, no one will want to communicate with the notorious alcoholic father. In other words, they reached a dead end, even though there was so much hope for the best at the beginning. However, Arusha would not be herself if she did not try to talk about this with her father. She admits that she has long dreamed of entering the academy, wanting to glorify the family name. Who would have thought that just 30 minutes later a carriage was arriving at the Duke Marquise's house? Something clearly happened to him if the man so easily agreed to accompany his daughter. When the girl started this conversation, she did not expect to receive permission. But the Duke accepted this request as if by refusing his daughter they had offended his own honor. Just in case, she suggests going back if Dad drank something before the visit. Arusha prepared seriously for the entrance exams, hoping to get a high score. It turns out that because of this nonsense about the parents' committee, the girl was kicked out of the group. All this time, she did not understand what was causing such drastic changes in her father. But now, looking at the confident gait of the Duke Marquis, all doubts disappear by themselves. The Marquis had long been a respected man and had not yet forgotten about honor and dignity. By the way, it wouldn't hurt for Madame Grant to remember this more often if she doesn't want any problems. Upon seeing the girl, she demands that she leave the castle immediately. Rudeness also has its limits. She is sure that the scoundrel Limerick is involved in her return. It is in his style. However, today Madame Grant will have to meet someone who never warns of his visits. It can be said that the father's help is his main sponsorship for his daughter's admission. Without the direct help of the Marquis, she would never have been accepted as a student at the Academy of Geniuses. The Duke decides to start the conversation by apologizing for his daughter. The girl has always been too shy. However, I should also apologize for my late introduction to the ladies. His name is Marquis Savlon, and he is the eldest son of the 5th Minister of the Empire. Approaching Madame Grant, the Marquis greets the woman who conducted the interview. The Grant family is as influential a family in the Empire as the Savlon family. She probably knows the basic minimum that teaches polite treatment of members of the nobility. Contrary to popular belief, everyone around notices that the young Duke does not behave like a drunkard at all. He is called his father's headache, although the Marquis is quite attractive in appearance. He recalls that his daughter recently tried to join the meeting but was refused. Of course, as an honest person, Madame Grant made a balanced decision based on the child's grades. Out of respect for his daughter's sincere request, he simply could not help but pay a visit to the castle. To prevent the girl from getting upset, Marquis only asks to explain to her the reason for her refusal to enroll. He assures that Madame can speak about this freely, without unnecessary familiarity. After thinking for a moment, Madame Grant answers briefly, as if the child had problems with his mother. If there are any problems with his wife, the Marquis asks to tell him more about it. Arusha decides to intervene in the conversation by showing the documents that she forgot at home last time. All of the teacher's assignments were completed in 30 minutes, according to Limerick. It seems that by joining the ladies of the parents' committee, Marquis will show them disrespect. Although it is clear from the ladies' appearance that they don't mind at all. The situation is very difficult, but he must do it at least for the sake of his daughter. Arusha begs her father to take this step. She really needs to get a place in Arte Castle. Even the parents from the committee suddenly start asking about it. Arusha's talent cannot be buried in the ground. They are ready to have a very fruitful friendship with Mr. Marquis if he agrees. Unlike the first time, this visit to Arte Castle turns out to be a real triumph. Teacher Limerick congratulates the girl on her admission. He has long considered her a young genius. The young man hopes that his documents were able to help her pass the interview. However, she still does not understand why the ladies from the committee agreed so easily. Arusha was wrong in assuming that her father would again create a scandal, as he usually did. Even now, the Marquis seems to be deliberately ignoring his daughter, knowing that she wants to talk. Suddenly, she realizes that she will still hear a few words from her dad. The Duke admits that he had been thinking about this for a long time, but had not been able to speak directly before. He finds Arushi's clothes absurd. They look like old junk from his grandmother's chest. It seems this man has decided to get on her nerves for the rest of her life. Today, something has clearly changed in him. His daughter's arrival forces the Marquis to change. He promises to make sure that the girl parts with this tasteless junk forever. Meanwhile, another capable student doesn't want to waste time. Entering his room, Dad asks Oscar to take a break from his studies for a while. Oscar is glad to see his dad, although he didn't expect him to stay in the mansion for long today. Freddie Savlon is truly sorry that his son was unable to enter the Genius Academy. He replies that he is not yet fully ready to become a student at an elite academy. More time is needed to prepare, otherwise he will be left out again next year. Freddie was always proud of him. Only perseverance and hard work can lift a person to the very top. The father reminds that the boy's cousin began to go outside the estate quite often. If he meets her on the street, Oscar should try to be polite. From that moment on, Dad decided to keep a closer eye on her. Arushi's father began to behave very strangely. Freddie was right, because the Duke Marquis really does decide to bring his daughter to the studio. The manager welcomes guests with joy and promises to do everything to ensure that the clothes are to their taste. The Marquis asks that all reserved clothing made from elite fabric be brought here. For his arrival, Ruben had prepared a variety of dresses for meetings, as well as for walks on the street. Although guests are always welcome at the establishment, the girl begins to feel something strange. The guy suggests going to the fitting room located on the top floor. It is worth taking a look at all the clothing items without doubting the quality of elite products. The very first dress that Arusha tries on completely transforms the child's appearance. As expected, Krobi was absolutely delighted with the clothes from the latest collection. At the same time, the girl tries to remember the name of this studio, which she has already met. Addressing the manager, the Marquis demands to see the limited edition dresses in a single copy. Ruben promises to return in a moment. He will bring something that will please the master. By the way, if a girl doesn't like a dress, she can say so in secret. However, this is not the case at all. Arusha is not yet completely sure of the honesty of this establishment. If she is right, the owner of the studio is Duke Nicholas. According to the plot, he is the third minister. The incident described in the novel took place in the establishment's building, or rather, in its basement. At the same time, Ruben goes down, hoping that there are no problems with the orphans. His friend Jim asks him to calm down. The whip will never stop, even with loud crying. The fat man is sure that children work too little, and they don't eat their bread for free. Ruben asks to count the number of dresses left from the limited edition. Realizing that all the dresses have already been sold, he gives exactly 15 minutes to sew a new dress. Even Jim was surprised the orphans hadn't slept for 3 days and wouldn't be able to complete the order so quickly. In this case, Ruben can teach him a special technique that greatly increases the speed of work. All that's needed is to break the legs of some of them so that the rest of the kids can quickly sew a new dress. Since this dress will just be stuffed into the closet after a couple of outings, there's no need to try too hard. 15 minutes later, the manager actually returns to the hall, wanting to surprise Arusha. In his hands is an exclusive dress made of the most expensive materials, which will highlight the lady's elegance. He assures that the model is not even included in the general catalog and was created specifically for a girl. Despite her anxiety, she doesn't want to offend her dad by refusing the dress. You just need to wait a while until she changes her clothes. While the girl's hair is being styled, she recalls some details of the basement below the studio. The staircase in the main building connects to the basement, which is where the orphans are locked up in the story. They sewed clothes day and night, stopping only for short lunch breaks. According to the original, this event is supposed to happen later, when Oscar becomes the leader. But even if Arusha tells the truth, no one will believe her anyway. She acts like she doesn't know about the locked-up orphans, but there are problems with the dress. Noticing her strange appearance, no one understands whether the child liked the dress. The Marquis asks to tell him honestly what exactly it was that the girl didn't like about the elite dress. The manager explains that she should move closer to the mirror and examine every detail. Only in this case will the lovely child be able to appreciate the master's talent. But even when she comes close to the mirror, the girl's mood does not change. What happens to the dress in a second can take even the Marquis by surprise. The girl is sure that a dress from the most expensive atelier cannot tear so easily. Arusha will not wear such a shabby dress that comes apart at the seams. The dresses turned out to be too cheap, even though the manager assured everyone that they were exclusive. If he is ready to repeat his words about premium quality, Arusha is waiting for his explanation. However, the Marquis also wants to hear a few words about why the expensive dress tore on his daughter. More than anything in the world, he hates scammers who pass off junk as expensive items. Approaching the girl, Krobi begins to play along with her, asking the girl not to worry about the dress. Ruben promises to replace their dress with a more expensive one without taking any money as compensation. Looks like this manager is really in big trouble today. The trash that is passed off as exclusive by a famous studio can simply be thrown in the trash. If Ruben is not a fraud, he is obliged to prove it to the girl's father. The dress could not have been torn to pieces simply because a small child accidentally stepped on it. After hearing a stream of curses from the young Duke, Ruben again asks for his forgiveness. He assures that he is proud of this establishment, but sometimes the craftsman can accidentally make mistakes. This does not seem like a convincing explanation. The Marquis wishes to speak with the owner of the studio. The person most responsible for the studio's operations must personally apologize for the incident. If Duke Nicholas is the master of this place, the Marquis wants to meet him face to face. It will be interesting to see how this will end if Mr. Nicholas finds out about it. According to the story, he is the next head of the fifth family, who is called the Mad Heir. But the worst thing is what grandfather will say about this if he somehow finds out about what happened. To avoid attracting unnecessary attention, the girl decides to quietly go outside. Knowing his father, Arusha already understands how the issue with the manager will be resolved. Turning around, the Marquis suddenly notices his daughter, who is quietly sneaking towards the main staircase. The girl gets a chance to get into the very basement where unfortunate children are forcibly held. She is allowed to act like a reckless child in this little girl's body. No one will scold the little girl for deciding to run around the corridors of the studio a little. However, only Arusha knows what is hidden behind the heavy door and what atrocities are taking place there. We need to save the children quickly. They won't be able to get out of there without help. The problem is that my small body doesn't allow me to reach the door handle. I should have taken Kroby with me with the young man's height. He could open any door. It's at moments like these that she regrets not having a slightly taller body. At least the heroine of the novel could have had at least one magical skill. Instead, the baby has to scream loudly so that the children on the other side can hear her voice. Unfortunately, another person answered her call. She clearly did not want such a meeting. Ruben reminds that a lady from the Savlon family cannot wander alone through the dark corridors. There is danger everywhere here. Children today are not taught to be vigilant at all. He orders everyone to get out of here immediately, otherwise the manager will not be responsible for himself. A voice behind him demands that he take his dirty paw off the little girl. It's worth explaining to the Marquis why he uses so much force on the child. Perhaps Ruben no longer needs his arm, in which case the Duke can break it right now. Quickly letting go of Arusha, he insists that he told the little girl to go upstairs to her dad. In fact, he did not want to allow the door behind which the orphans were hidden to be opened. Arusha asks to open it, then she can play with them a little. As expected, the young Duke does not immediately believe his daughter. He considers this statement complete nonsense. The manager hadn't heard anything like that either, since the area behind the door had long been abandoned. However, there is not a speck of dust on the door handle. Is it really true that this abandoned place is so carefully guarded? And indeed, for a warehouse that no one uses, it is suspiciously clean here. The Marquis begins to realize that someone has recently entered and exited the area behind the door. Since the child insists, it won't be difficult for Ruben to simply open it, right? If the child talks nonsense, the Marquis promises to apologize for the girl. At this moment, everyone else appears nearby. The Duke could use some support. Kroby promises to tear the door off its hinges if the manager does not fulfill the request. In such situations, they always play along with the Marquis, without even really knowing the essence of the matter. Suddenly, Ruben declares that secret data is kept behind this door. Even if Marquis Savlon asks for it, he has no right to invade someone else's territory. To tell the truth, the Marquis now wanted to open that damn door even more. After all, he still doesn't understand how a new dress can rip. He intends to see with his own eyes the process of sewing clothes in this studio. Then Ruben will be able to mark the calendar on this day. Their circus will end forever. The next day, news of Duke Nicholas's arrest spreads throughout the empire. The newspapers write about a terrible secret of the studio, owned by the Duke. We must give the journalists their due. They describe yesterday's entire story, word for word. It is only from a newspaper article that Deborah learns of the deed that the young gentleman committed. After finishing reading the article, she suddenly remembers the previous night, when she noticed something strange. The girl collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, unable to even tell about the incident in Nicholas's studio. Next time the maid asks to tell everything, she wants to be the first to know the news. Arusha shouldn't have left alone, and besides, she was really very tired. It's scary to imagine what would have happened to the girl if the Marquis had not been there. Deborah asks that adults be warned in advance if the little one is planning something like this. Looking at the sweet maid, Arusha apologizes for making her worry. To seal the oath, the girl orders him to pull out his small, fragile little finger. Arusha must remember this oath, otherwise her words will no longer be believed. However, there has been nothing good in the news for a long time, but this case is special. One can be sure that what happened will definitely make Duke Sherman proud of his son. Hearing about his grandfather, Arusha gets the idea to go to his estate right away. Strangely enough, the maid advises against doing this, as now is not the best time. Right now, he is in the Imperial Palace, where an important meeting is taking place. Deborah was not mistaken, a meeting of the heads was indeed scheduled for that day. Duke Sherman is already aware of the latest news, although some details will be revealed a little later. One thing is clear, Duke Cartier is not at the meeting, which means the rumors about the studio are true. Noticing the old man's doubts, the 7th Minister advises against jumping to conclusions. He explains that Duke Cartier is an important government official and has quite a lot to do. If no one objects, Andros suggests starting the meeting without his participation. Since First Minister Cartier is absent, Andro will become the temporary head of the assembly. Having delivered his opening speech, he gives the floor to Duke Sherman. Sherman admits that when he arrived at the scene, everything had already ended long ago. The owner of the orphanage and the servants who abused the children had already been detained by the Marquis. It was established that children were being subjected to unfair labor by order of Duke Nicholas. According to confiscated records, one of the children was kept locked up for 10 years. Even animals don't behave like some of the monsters in this studio. After hearing the story, Pascal declares that it was only with the help of the Marquis that the lives of these children were saved. Antonio agrees with this. The son of Duke Sherman is a real angel for these unfortunate people. Suddenly, Durr decides to remind that Mr. Marquis ended up near the basement completely by accident. But if you remember, last month this bastard destroyed their family winery. However, now it is worth understanding what happened to the rescued children and whether there were casualties among the captives. As the total number has exceeded 100, the bodies found in northern areas are causing complications. Since Nicholas has tarnished the reputation of 12 ministers, someone must restore it. For his part, Duke Sherman is ready to open an orphanage and maintain its condition at a high level. Andro is glad to hear such a statement. He did not expect anything else from the Duke. He decides to discuss Nicholas's future. A suitable candidate needs to be found. At this moment, Sherman seemed to recognize his alcoholic son again, who had finally been useful. You just need to have a little hope. Sometimes that's all it takes to make a difference. At the same time, the young crown prince remains at his father's residence. The emperor had already heard about the feat of the Marquis and his little daughter. He wants to know the crown prince's opinion on how they should deal with the guilty Duke Nicholas. The boy immediately replies that the criminals must receive the punishment they deserve. At the same time, this girl's family will become a model. This news must be spread throughout the empire. To prevent crimes, Elliot suggests dealing harshly with Nicholas. Of course, the severity of the punishment must be determined by the court, strictly following the laws of the empire. After listening to the boy, the emperor seemed to remember himself in his distant youth. However, he must understand that not all human lives have the same value. If they execute an official because of the use of a couple of orphaned children, it will create problems. As a future emperor, Elliot must look much further than ordinary people are accustomed to. Listening to his father's terrible words, the crown prince cannot understand why he has become so cruel. It's definitely because of the woman the Cartier family introduced a year ago. At this moment, the very woman who had greatly changed the emperor appears behind him. Malaysia even looked like a cunning woman, and it was strange that her father didn't notice it. She asks His Highness for forgiveness for keeping him waiting for too long. However, important state affairs cannot take place in the presence of a small child. If you recall, not long ago, Malaysia was invited to the palace as a medical expert. She was tasked with curing the empress, who had been suffering from an unknown illness for a year. As a result, thanks to her mastery of magic and enchantments, the empress's health improved significantly. True, this was a temporary improvement. Very soon the disease began to return. Under the pretext of continuing treatment, Malaysia remained in the imperial palace. She managed to quickly win the emperor's favor, making him her puppet. As usual, Malaysia apologizes for the sudden visit, which interrupted the conversation with the young prince. The man is sure that the conversation is already over, and it is time for the crown prince to leave. Meanwhile, dear Mrs. Malaysia must come a little closer to him. Suddenly, the woman announces that the Empress's condition is getting much better. She invites the boy to visit his mother in her chambers while she is conscious. This news pleases not only Elliot, but also the Emperor himself. This is exactly what should be done. He asks to convey greetings to the Empress on behalf of the Emperor while he is busy in his office. After waiting for the little nuisance to leave the room, the woman decides to take action. Finally, they will enjoy their solitude again, because this is why Malaysia came here. By evening, special agents had already received the necessary orders. The Emperor made it clear that he needed Duke Nicholas alive and unharmed. Nicholas was not happy that they had arrived so late. The man was already very hungry. Dealing with the guards took a little longer than expected. This young duke dared to humiliate him by entering the secret room of the studio. Nicholas dreams of getting out of here as soon as possible so that he can then settle scores with the entire Marquis family. However, first he needs to explain something to his old friend. Seeing the freed prisoner, Duke Sherman demands to know what is going on here. They have no respect for the Emperor at all if they dare to attack the old man after the double murder. However, according to Nicholas, Duke Sherman does not understand anything about the real laws. A few unfortunate orphans cannot compare with the life of one great duke. Noticing the surroundings, Sherman realizes that this man is ready to go too far. He reminds us that the tragedy could have been avoided if not for the old man's son. Moreover, Duke Sherman came here without protection, as if he did not understand the true opinion of the Emperor. First, he intends to kill him, and then take care of the other family members. As a result of the Marquis's childish act, his closest people will end up in the ground. Sherman has to quickly explain which of the two is the victim. This idiot still doesn't understand why Duke Sherman came to the dungeon. In vain did he decide to draw his blade instead of negotiating, having made a criminal deal with the families. This time the old man does not intend to close his eyes, as he did many years ago. Preparing for the attack, Nicholas reminds that this was only revenge for Sherman's past. His opponent is fully prepared for such a reaction, having set up a defense in advance. Over the years, Duke Nicholas should have remembered how he was accustomed to acting in response. He is not used to sparing his enemies, especially when they decide to attack first. The Duke warns that after this murder he himself will become the same dirty criminal. How is Sherman different from him if he solves problems in the same way? However, he could still ask the old man about this the next time he met him in hell. Nocturne asks not to worry about anything due to the gravity of his sin. The criminal decided to commit suicide. He will make sure that the message is conveyed to the Emperor in exactly these words. In response, Duke Sherman thanks the secretary. He always knew how to understand things correctly. A short time later, the Duke's carriage had already left the territory of the city dungeon. Nocturne believes that the master's decision was absolutely correct. If he had not stopped the Great House's plan, everything could have ended much more tragically. In the secretary's place, any other person would have sincerely hated Duke Sherman. In the distant past, when he was still a child, Nocturne met him on a terrible day. He was the only survivor of a fire in his house, caused by young Sherman. Realizing that the Duke was now responsible for the life of this young man, Sherman provided him with a job and a title. One could say that his past life died that night, but the Duke gave him a new one in return. That is why the old man will not allow the tragedy of one family killing another to happen again. For this he will pay any price, even if the price is his own life. At the end of the conversation, the young secretary promises to be with his master until the end. Now Sherman needs to prepare horses instead of a carriage. The press is already waiting for his statement. As he steps out of the carriage, he understands that his own son is the one who is waiting for his words first and foremost. The old man is ready to listen to all reproaches if the Marquis has arrived for this purpose. He probably knows what really happened in the city dungeon. However, the young Duke does not want anything. He is very tired after returning from the studio. In that case, they should talk about this incident in the studio. The old man has something to say. Sherman is truly surprised by his son's actions, which are worthy of the leader of the family. In response, the Marquis admits that he did not do this for the sake of his family. The reason was completely different. He doesn't care how his father or his allies use it. Let it be a small gift. However, the Marquis had no need to hear him speak words of praise in his address. Having said this, the young Duke turns away abruptly, hoping not to see the old man at least today. He silently heads to the house where his loved ones have been waiting for him for a long time. Returning to the estate, the Marquis hopes to quickly forget about what happened in the studio. Nocturne breaks the silence, promising Sherman to settle all the issues as he promised. At that moment, they hear a loud child's voice somewhere high above their heads. Greeting her grandfather, Irusha admits that she missed him very much. Nocturne tells them to go down immediately. It's dangerous for little girls to do something like that. Looking at his granddaughter, Duke Sherman suddenly realizes that he has always paid too little attention to her. The girl said that she missed her grandfather, but he never reciprocated her feelings. She wanted to tell her about something very important, but her grandfather always ran out of time. This concerns her dad, so the old man should listen to his granddaughter at least once. As usual, the secretary intervenes in the conversation, but he asks him to calm down. He became curious about what this little wretch wanted to tell him. To have a conversation, you should step aside a little. This only applies to family members. Before her grandfather's conversation with her father, she was confident that the Marquis had managed to gain respect. Regardless of whether she gets kicked out or not, now she has to go all the way and do everything she can. In this situation, only Irusha can protect Dad, otherwise the original story will repeat itself again. Entering the house, the girl once again reminds us how much she had been looking forward to this meeting. In the living room, they will be able to calmly talk about everything without fear of being overheard. Having settled himself more comfortably, Duke Sherman asks to begin his explanation. Irusha is glad that her grandfather spent some time with her. She knows how much weight has fallen on his shoulders. True, the little girl slightly miscalculated the trajectory of her fall onto the sofa. I have to apologize again for my manners. The girl is just nervous before an important conversation. If his granddaughter wants, Duke Sherman can bring her hot chocolate. However, he did have something he wanted to talk about that was important to the family. He asks not to judge her grandfather too harshly, but the relationship with her father has long since reached a dead end. Perhaps she already has an idea of how difficult it will be to make peace again after a long quarrel. The girl reminds that her father did very well towards the orphans. Now Duke Marquis is liked by the whole city. People praise him for his heroic deed. It is true that the Marquis did a commendable deed, but only in the eyes of others. In Sherman's eyes, the situation looks different. He is sure that the guy did not intend to commit it. Irusha begins to passionately tell how her father beat up the store manager in front of the employees. If he hadn't shown up on time, the girl would have been in big trouble with the local salesman. As she ran down the stairs, he quickly followed her, catching her near the basement. Only thanks to her father did she manage to escape, because the Marquise caught the scoundrel in time. It would be great if grandfather praised Dad for this. He is probably waiting for these words from him. At this moment, hot chocolate is brought into the room especially for the little lady. After finishing a whole glass of chocolate, she finally feels alive again. Even though Grandpa seems unusually lenient today, she still feels a little uneasy. After a short pause, he agrees that his son's behavior has changed for the better. If father screws up, Irusha promises to keep an eagle eye on him. Sherman cannot help but understand that this little girl played an important role in solving the incident. As the head of the family and a titled Duke of the Empire, he is obliged to reward her. Duke Sherman promises to give her anything the young heroine desires. In other words, any wish that comes to her mind will be immediately fulfilled. Since this is a rare opportunity, he advises thinking more carefully. Before making a decision, the girl may take some time to think. It's incredible, but he really won't take his words back, no matter what his granddaughter's wishes may be. In that case, she has already thought of everything. This desire has long been her most cherished one. Falling to her knees, the little girl begs him to return her father to the estate where they lived a month ago. It will be very good if the Marquis lives in his home again, and his daughter with him. It is very important to re-educate the Marquis, but the balance between life and death of Irushi is also important. At least she would be able to live in her home, where she would feel at peace. Finally, the old man suggests that she think again whether she is serious about fulfilling her wish. He is ready to give a little more time, not wanting his granddaughter to regret her decision later. However, in response, the girl insists on her own she simply has no other desire. 10 minutes later, Duke Sherman watches the girl leave, pondering their conversation. Sherman was almost certain that the child would ask for sweets or new toys. But in Irushi's life, there is only her father left, so she will be happier if he is happy. Words about happiness sound a little strange when it comes to the Savlon family. It is difficult to remember the last time the Duke heard such words about family happiness. Without saying anything to her dad, the little girl was already expecting changes the next morning. She ran into the living room, hoping to see her dad wandering around the house with a bottle of wine. Instead of the Duke, she sees only an empty room, although he spends the morning in the mansion. Looking back, she notices his friend in the distance, who was talking to someone about business. It turned out that the whole time the young Duke was on the balcony with his personal assistant. He assures Kroby that this time he will set a proper example of how to act. He agrees with everything, because criminals must always be punished as the law dictates. Entering them, the girl wants to understand why the young people started talking. It's strange how much the Marquis is interested in this, although usually nothing interests him. It's time to talk about the letter. Arusha hands him his grandfather's message. He must quickly read this message, sent for the first time in many years. Instead of himself, he entrusts the reading to his assistant. Kroby also has the right to do this. Opening the letter, Kroby solemnly announces the Duke's order to return the estate back. In other words, they can pack their things right now and head to their home estate. It is clear that it is Arusha who should be thanked for returning home. Finally, they can return to their happy home, where there is a wide swimming pool and a playroom. Having supported the girl, Kroby suggests that they quickly start collecting the most necessary things. However, the Duke does not look happy. He understands well why the old man did it. He doesn't treat the return as a gift at all, since the mansion originally belonged to him. And yet, he asks his daughter to answer honestly why she made this particular wish. It's obvious that the estate belongs to the Pope, which means the Marquise must live there. She remembers well how much the Duke has done for her recently, starting from the day she entered. The Duke went to Artie Castle with his daughter and then bought her beautiful clothes. That's why she wished for her beloved dad to become a little happier. Now Kroby is seriously jealous of his friend. He also wants to have a daughter. Instead, the Marquis orders them to pack their things, and they all head back to the mansion together. After much hard work, Arusha was finally able to bring her idea to life. The girl should also pack her things. The Marquis takes her with him to the heir's estate. The maids immediately begin to congratulate the young lady because the heir's estate is much better. The trouble is that you can say goodbye to your lonely, happy life on your father's estate forever. Just a couple of hours later, the Duke again sees the familiar house in which he spent his entire life. Kroby is happy with his daughter's success. This girl deserves a standing ovation for all her efforts. By the way, the Duke's new cloak is ideal for the role of the owner of a large estate. There's no need to worry about a lawsuit. Kroby promises to take care of all the paperwork. At this point, the assistant reminds us of the valuables left by the Duke in the old estate. Of course, the personal assistant made sure to deliver them along with the rest of the things. Having given him the doll, he asks to return the lovely toy to its real owner. However, the Marquis can simply place it in a prominent place, remembering his daughter. Looking at the doll, he seems to hear the voice of his wife, who gave him an heiress. That day, the Marquis felt happy for the first time, seeing his two closest people. The time has come to remember her last testament, which he forgot in his alcoholic oblivion. The girl really worked hard to return the estate back to her father. To tell the truth, Arusha is no longer upset with her dad for throwing away toys. He gave her so many new dolls that they would last her the rest of her childhood. The estate is very different from the old one. There are 10 times more servants and cooks here. However, the main thing is that there is definitely no one here who would be capable of throwing away her toys. Another good news is that Deborah agrees to play with her in her free time. The entire second floor of the house was given over to her, meaning there would definitely be no problems with space for games. She hasn't yet had time to sort out the wardrobe, study room, and bathroom. The maid asks her not to be shy. If she needs anything, she should immediately contact her grandfather. The girl suggests looking at other rooms if they are already finished with this one. The idea is great, but first the little one wants to try out the new furniture, starting with her bed. Arusha is sure that on such a big bed she will only have wonderful dreams. In this case, the maid promises to wake the girl up before lunch, but in the meantime she leaves her in the room. If she needs anything, all she has to do is call her loudly. With these words, the girl leaves the room, leaving the little mistress alone with the toys. Making sure that no one is around, Arusha decides to do what she usually couldn't do in her previous house. She mentally turns to the novel's original heroine, hoping that she is happy with the move. Overall, she's glad the Marquis brought her here after all. Arusha is his only daughter. A beloved daughter, and not at all a child from a mistress locked in an old forgotten estate. If you think about it, this is clearly for the best, and there is no need to be offended by Dad. The main thing is that she is comfortable, and the rest will work out on its own over time. Meanwhile, Teacher Limerick can't wait to share the good news. Once at the new estate, he announces the appointment of a reception date at the Artie Castle. According to Madame Grant's invitation, it will take place in a week in a house on the outskirts of the capital. In addition, the young man remembers that the young lady asked about recruiting a new group. Limerick took the list of accepted students with him so that she could look at it. He announces that occasionally children under 8 years of age were able to enter the academy. The criteria for selecting such children are surrounded by rumors and speculation, but the main thing is that it is possible. Judging by the teacher's guess, getting on this list will be incredibly difficult. There is a certain blessing of the house that opens the doors to any applicant. He asks not to worry. Limerick will definitely be able to find clues for admission to the academy. Now is the time to think about how to make connections and gather all the necessary information. Having said these words, Teacher Limerick hands her the dossiers and family trees of the main guests. At the next lesson, the young man suggests starting to discuss deals. It is not necessary to remember everything at once. You can calmly study document after document. Suddenly, Arusha asks if the eldest of the Xavier daughters will appear at the next reception. It must be said, it is true, the girl will be attending an official reception for the first time. In the tragic original plot, she becomes obsessed with Prince Elliot. Having lost her mind, the girl gouges out both of the Crown Prince's eyes, not receiving reciprocal sympathy. It is known that according to the family tree, this girl is Lady Arushi's cousin. Given the relationship between the Xavier and Savlon families, she may well feel animosity towards her. Convinced by Limerick's words, she understands who she must keep an eye on at the upcoming reception. At the same time, a rather talented young man is heading towards the Marquise's office. Lecce is the personal tailor of the Duke Marquis, although he is not at all happy with this role. In the past, life seemed wonderful to him, but now the boy has sunk to the role of a personal tailor. In the fashion industry, his reputation is now in ruins, with everyone calling Lecce the Duke's lackey. No matter how much effort he puts into tailoring his clothes, it is all overshadowed by his poor social manners. Entering the office, he decides to gather his will into a fist and do what fate has led him to. With a statement already prepared in his pocket, Lecce decides to quit this damn job. The Marquis learns from the young man that he is going to enroll in the Academy of Geniuses. Lately, the name of this academy has been mentioned too often in his presence. Listening to the Duke's answer, the young man does not understand what is causing this strange reaction. At this moment, he notices another person who came into the office before him. The Duke's little daughter assures that she will definitely enter the academy, despite her age. She asks her dad to go with her so that it will be easier to put her thoughts in order. Turning around, she suddenly notices a strange expression on the young tailor's face. She seemed so engrossed in her conversation with her father that she didn't notice the third person at all. The Duke orders you to come to the table. It's time to stop acting like a little child. Surely the Marquis would not refuse if Lecce sewed a new dress for his lovely daughter. The proposal is quite interesting, but the Duke can give exactly 6 days to complete the work. This is the latest deadline for completing the order, as there is an important reception in 6 days. At first, Lecce tries to protest, reminding them that such orders take months to sew. There is no time for this. In a month, no one will need the dress. The Marquis reminds that he has not made a single suit for the Duke recently. However, he continued to earn money by cooling his heels and pretending to be a free artist. If they understand each other, the Marquis asks to take measurements from Arushi and begin to carry out the task. Looking at the girl, he suddenly feels ashamed of himself, although Lecce owes her nothing. After asking you to raise your arms a little above your shoulders, he slowly takes measurements of the future masterpiece. Arusha does everything the master asks, patiently waiting for the work to be completed. At some point, she suddenly realizes that the master has completely lost interest in the matter. Turning around, the girl tries to understand what she did wrong and how she could have caused such a reaction. In response, the master apologizes for such an unsightly appearance. He will soon take measurements for her new dress. The young lady only needs to wait a little. Arusha sees how the boy starts to cry, although there is no reason for it. Grabbing the young man tightly, she asks him not to pay attention to his father. He has been so grumpy all his life. He makes Arusha nervous too, so she understands the young master like no one else. Oddly enough, Lecce considers himself an inexperienced craftsman who has no understanding of fashion. Arusha reminds that she will wear the dress that is being sewn and not Duke Marquis. She asks him to simply let go of inspiration and make the dress the way he personally likes. The main thing is that it is quite durable and does not get dirty too much. Apart from 2 wishes, there is nothing else that the young lady will pay attention to. It can be said that this order is becoming the best of those that the master has ever completed. Until recently, he was determined to submit his resignation and leave the world of fashion forever. Even now, Lecce is almost certain that after sewing the dress, he will find another job. But looking at the inspiration with which he gets down to business, it's hard to believe that this is so. As the Duke had warned, a gala reception was held at the Castle of Arte 6 days later. It is not easy to see such dazzling carriages as those that passed by on this day on another day. After looking at the carriages for a long time, the boy suddenly imagines the most pleasant thing. He dreams of cutting them into pieces with his sword so that not a trace of them remains. Winston warns that this is not his mission at all. It's time to stop behaving like this. They came to look for other people with housewards like Winston and Edmund. Besides, he constantly boasts about his sword, which looks terribly stupid from the outside. At this moment, the boy notices how the carriage stops right in front of the entrance. The lady carefully descends. She has been in this place before. Dressed in a new custom-made dress, Arusha looks stunning. She immediately draws all attention to herself. Even Winston decides to take a break from his book. Looking at her, he guesses that he sees Arusha Savlon from the 5th great house below. Today, her father arrives at the castle with her, although this time the Marquise is behaving quite decently. Edmund always considered her a half-blood, standing between the House of Wizards and the House of Swordmasters. The boy will be glad if he ever gets the chance to cut them both apart. If such an opportunity arose right now, he would immediately come forward to meet her. His friend tries to calm him down again. He can't even think about such stupidity. And yet it is strange that the Crown Prince gathers gifted children in such a place. If anything comes to light, they must write down every detail, leaving nothing out. Edmund can only watch quietly as his cherished target slips away into the castle. But there is still a lot of time ahead. The boy has his whole life to achieve his goal. Meanwhile, among the invited guests, there are those who did not have time to introduce themselves to the others. To begin with, we suggest listening to Arusha. She is attending such an event for the first time. I must say she prepared quite well, judging by her extraordinary dress. Along with herself, the girl introduces her father to the public, without whom her visit would not have been possible. It can be considered that the official entry into the Castle of Arte was entirely his merit. Addressing the children, she hopes to soon learn the name of each participant. Some guests would prefer to listen to her wonderful, unmarried father. The main rivalry is just beginning when a rather famous girl enters the hall. She welcomes all guests and participants of the event, having no doubt about her success. It was this girl that Teacher Limerick was talking about when he warned about her participation. Sevilla is the eldest daughter of the Xavier family and is known for her arrogant nature. The girl asks not to ask unnecessary questions about her mother, who will not be able to be here today. If no one objects, the girl asks to start dinner. She is too hungry. Now it's clear why she has so few friends and so much bad gossip. Arusha believed that from childhood she was a real tyrant, and this was quite easily explained. Gradually, the voices begin to fade away. The girls disperse to different tables in small groups. As expected, Arusha is seated at the same table with Sevilla. This is a good chance to act. Suddenly, the girl decides to talk to her first, asking an awkward question about her mother. It is known that she came with her father. No one would talk about such a thing on the day they met. Even the famously cruel empress did not behave as languidly as Sevilla. The girl decides to remind him that her dad is much more handsome than any 10 mothers. Realizing that she is dodging the question, Sevilla insistently demands that she stop. She knows that Arusha has only recently started studying with a tutor, but already wants to enroll in arte. She believes that a girl should understand the basics of science before doing this. But Teacher Limerick is a graduate of the Academy of Geniuses. Isn't that enough? Some still don't believe that an elite teacher would agree to take on a newcomer. Having overheard the conversation, Edmund wants to know his friend's opinion about Teacher Arushi. He asks not to bother her with stupid questions. The girl passed the exam quite well. Judging by her expression, Sevilla doesn't want to get a truthful answer at all. She envies the fame of her interlocutor, who managed to get into an elite academy. However, she is not at all against such a reaction. Only true envious people show it. Continuing to play her role, Arusha suggests becoming friends. With such a proposal, she only ignites the fire of rage in the soul of this strange girl. When Sevilla entered the castle, her father never even praised her for her excellent progress. Comparing herself to Arusha, she understands how much Duke Marquis loves his daughter. These thoughts make her want to burn with fire. It is important not to show emotions in front of the group. Suddenly, one of the guests remembers that this year Seville turns 8 years old. This makes it even funnier, because at this age it's time to stop using bibs. Even the smallest children are embarrassed to wear something like this, hiding it from their friends. Realizing that this was a chance, Arusha decides to stand up for her new friend. She believes that there is nothing shameful about this. On the contrary, it helps one to enjoy food calmly. For example, her bib was sewn onto the collar of her new dress in advance by a tailor. Instead of gratitude, she suddenly jumps up, demanding that he stop protecting her. Moreover, she can scratch out the eyes of that stupid boy who dared to humiliate her. If he thinks Sevilla can't eat without a bib, she can rip it off. The next second, the girl fulfills her promise by tearing it off her new dress. Looking at her, I feel a little uneasy. She could have easily not done this. The trouble is that, having miscalculated her strength, she accidentally hits her main protector. Arusha falls to the floor from a strong push, not expecting such a reaction from Sevilla. This scene quickly attracts everyone's attention. The girl does not know how to behave at all. No one can understand why she pushed Arusha, who was standing quite far from there. She asks for forgiveness, assuring that she did not mean to do anything like that. The hand seemed to jump to the side on its own, painfully hitting the fragile Lady Arusha. Now the dress was ruined, because the juice from the glass spilled onto the sleeve of the expensive dress. And yet, instead of throwing unnecessary tantrums, she decides to head back to Sevilla. This sleeve can be simply removed. It will not spoil the look at all. With one sharp movement, Arusha rips off the dirty sleeve of her evening dress. She asks not to worry about anything, because with this action the girl only removed one element. The dirty lace is hidden inside the sleeve. This was the master's intention from the very beginning. But if you pull the inner ribbon, the lace sleeves instantly turn into regular sleeves. Her tailor is a true genius, which is why her father put him in charge of the dress. Right now she is wearing the latest modular dress that no one else in the world has. However, that's not all. For the next performance she will need an assistant. Madame Grant's help would be very welcome if she agreed to do a small favor. She must be wondering how Arusha survived such an attack. The girl asks not to worry about anything. You just need to reach out to her for a second. Then pull the string of beads that holds the tied bow. Voila! Now the back of the dress resembles an angel with wonderful transparent wings. Arusha realizes that the distraction with the dress was a complete success. As she expected, Lecce's idea would shock children who were not accustomed to such innovations. More importantly, Sevilla is still a small child and not a cruel tyrant. Leaving her in this position would be too cruel, and in the future Arusha would gain an enemy. That is why she tried to talk to the girl, trying to win her over to her side. Coming closer, Arusha allows her tailor to examine the dress closely and repeat it. All the girls immediately run to their mothers, asking them to order the same unusual dress. Edmund begins to realize that this strange girl is truly talented. His friend reminds him again that this is not why they came here. And yet he is right. Lady Arusha was able to resolve the situation, even after Sevilla's constant provocations. In the end, a bib or a dress doesn't matter. Girls are allowed to do it. The longer Winston looks at this girl, the harder it becomes to look away. There is no magic or patronage here. She has real charisma. Suddenly, Winston changes his mind. He no longer wants to discuss Lady Arusha with his friend. Hearing the proposal to lure the girl to his side, he demands that she not even dare think about it. In that case, it's time for Winston to think about how to describe the situation in his report to His Highness. It seems that the next time they meet, it will be on an even more exciting stage. After some time, the general noise in the hall gives way to conversations at the tables. If it's not too much trouble, the girls want to find out Arushi's biggest secret. The older students are ready to do anything just to get her to introduce them to her tailor. She knows very well how everyone goes crazy dreaming of wearing the same unusual dress. The Duke Marquis probably wouldn't want his personal tailor's name to become too well known. Suddenly, one of the girls makes another request, only it's not about a dress at all. Perhaps she would be interested in how to gain the favor of teacher Soginius. Regarding exams, she can contact Arusha with any questions. They will always help with advice. Realizing that it would be better to tell about the tailor, she prepared to name him. Suddenly appearing nearby, the Marquis declares that his daughter does not intend to take the exam at the castle. However, she reminds that she really wants to wear this dress at the academy in front of her friends. In fact, the Duke is not sure that the girl was able to make friends so quickly. Only now did he utter those words that would be unpleasant for anyone to hear. It's as if he doesn't understand that by wearing the same dresses, she will become much closer to her new friends. Dad should understand her, because the girl is just learning to get to know other children. She begs him to tell her the name of the master who created the dress for her. As a result, after hearing the tailor's name, Despised noticeably gets more work. The young man's life changed dramatically, as orders began pouring in from all sides. In his letter to Arusha, he talks about how he had long dreamed of creating his own design. Without relying on the Duke's taste and following his own inspiration, Lecce was able to create many masterpieces. All achievements can be safely attributed to that little lady who taught me to believe in myself. However, now he is almost certain that he has reached his final limit of mastery. While working on the dress, Lecce realized that he could no longer work as a personal tailor. All he wanted was recognition of his talent and people's love for his creations. As a result, secretly from the Duke, the young man intended to leave the capital and open his own studio. At that very moment, he hears the voice of his first client, of whom there will later be many more. Turning around, the young man tries to understand how this unknown lady knows his name. What's also strange is that after a few minutes, several more clients appeared next to her. They want to organize a group purchase by sewing absolutely identical dresses in different sizes. It got to the point that girls were queuing up to see the young master from early morning. 10 days later, the Duke Marquis makes an appointment with the tailor in the center of the garden. He has been waiting for the young talent for a long time, knowing about his decision to become a freelance artist. Once there, Lecce apologizes for making the Marquis wait for his arrival. The dress fittings were already completely finished. Lecce had finished with the clothes 5 minutes ago. The time had come to see what the young designer had dreamed of seeing his whole life. The girls are indeed wearing identical dresses, each of which is a different size. It's amazing that so many people have fallen in love with this dress style in such a short time. It was originally meant only for Arushi, but now other children will wear it. He thanks the Marquis for allowing the Duke to sew dresses for other girls. After this order, he received a huge number of new orders from different families. However, the last phrase abruptly changes the good mood of the Duke Marquis. The young man completely forgot that he was a personal tailor and could not accept other orders. He promises to refuse all clients, explaining the strict terms of the contract with the Marquis. The Marquis asks to repeat again the name of the dress, which is in great demand. At this moment, the lady realizes that the time has come to show herself. She decides to amuse them a little by scaring them with her sudden appearance from the dense thicket. In fact, if Arusha had not worn this dress, no one would have known the master's name. The design is unlikely to gain such popularity without proper advertising. She reminds us that without Lecce's help, she wouldn't have been able to quickly make friends with the children. Suddenly, the girl hears her name. Someone loudly calls Arusha to him. Before leaving, she thanks her dad again for telling everyone the name of her personal tailor. Lecce is truly proud of this model. It turned out to be the best of all the others. Even as a personal tailor, he is grateful for the opportunity to create such things. In that case, he can do with his orders as he wishes. The Marquis does not want to stop him. He assures that there are many other craftsmen who can sew him a suitable suit. In other words, from this day on, their contract is null and void, and Lecce are their own team. Finally, the Marquis asks to send Arusha all the new dresses that he will create. Having said these words, the Duke goes into the house and their relationship is completely over. News of the appearance of the brilliant tailor Despised instantly spread throughout the empire. The dress that Sevilla will soon receive was once made for the Duke's daughter. Her sister is looking forward to seeing the famous model with her own eyes. The girl is delighted with this reaction and can't wait to become the owner of this masterpiece. Perhaps later Malaysia will also want to have a new dress made for herself by such a famous master. By the way, the girl would like to know when Sevilla plans to go to the palace next time. Malaysia has only arrived for a few days, so she won't be able to stay too long. She suggests they talk to their heart's content before bed, which delights her younger sister. As in the old days, she wants to braid the girl's hair, inviting her to sit down more comfortably. While the sister is doing this, the girl can tell an interesting story. For example, she can retell everything that happened in Arte Castle during the festive ceremony. It is especially interesting to learn about Arusha Savlon, the daughter of the Duke's late wife. The next day, a strange surprise awaited the Marquis, arranged by a friend in his house. Entering the living room, he doesn't immediately understand why Kroby caused this commotion here. He orders his servants to handle each copy with care, hanging them on the walls. Seeing the owner of the house, he explains that the feat of the Marquis's daughter should remain in memory forever. This is the first time Arusha has been mentioned in a newspaper, and such an event cannot be ignored. Of course, they should hang the publication right in the center of the reception area for everyone to admire. The girl became the most talked about heroine of the month, a truly dizzying success. Lecce even gave an interview to the most famous newspaper, although the young man had always been a shy fellow. Kroby has already heard that the Duke has terminated his exclusive contract with Lecce Basto, which is quite strange. It is curious what made the Duke refuse to collaborate with the talented master. He reminds that part of the secretary's job is to have a full understanding of the situation. Suddenly, the Marquise replies that at that moment he had no choice. Arusha said that she wanted to wear these dresses with the other children. He couldn't refuse. It's hard to believe, but the young Duke actually did this for his daughter. Thanks to this, the girl made a brilliant debut in high society, stunning everyone with her new creations. Hearing that they were talking about her, the girl asks to explain what they are doing here. She hopes that Dad slept well. Yesterday was a very busy day. Kroby reminds that the young lady came in just in time. They were just discussing the news. Seeing the frame, the girl asks to explain what these two are up to this time. This is exactly what Kroby wanted to talk about. The Marquis himself ordered it to be hung on the wall. The young man claims that the Duke ordered the article mentioning her name to be framed. Arusha had never read an article in which she was the main character. This is quite unusual, considering that she is not a famous person at all. The best part is that Dad himself made a beautiful frame and hung it in the very center of the room. Grabbing his hand, she promises to try much harder in the future to please him more often. The girl hopes that her father will help her in the same way he did during the ceremony. I guess we can thank that rascal Kroby for the frame idea. Lately, he himself had often wondered about his new behavior. Until recently, the Marquis would not have given in to all the whims of his little child. But it seemed inevitable, given how much his little girl had changed. This is just the beginning. In the future, this girl will be able to truly surprise everyone. However, the Duke orders the frame to be replaced with another one. This frame is too small for such important articles. He asks Kroby to make sure that all the articles about his daughter fit into the new frame. The assistant asks not to worry about this. The new frame will be ready in 10 minutes. He is obliged to bring into the hall the largest and most exquisite frame that is in the mansion. Meanwhile, at Duke Sherman's estate, everyone already knows about the article about the little lady. That very girl the whole city is talking about is Lady Arusha Savlon. The article describes everything, from the incident in the Count's house to the ill-fated studio. For an ordinary 5-year-old child, this girl's actions are truly impressive. The secretary also managed to read the morning newspaper. He was sure that the Duke would be pleased with the news. However, even if the article is positive, Arusha is involved in incidents and is under the attention of journalists. If a father and daughter ever end up in the accident column, it will bring shame on the family. Recently, Duke Sherman had tasked him with finding out what that strange group was doing. Nocturne explains that the meeting place of these people is constantly changing, which makes the investigation difficult. As soon as anything becomes known about the mysterious group, he promises to inform you immediately. Having received instructions, the secretary slowly leaves the office of the owner of the Savlon estate. At that moment, he hears a familiar male voice. Someone called him by name. Freddie Savlon greets the young secretary, realizing how much work has fallen on him. He asks to spare him 1 minute. This concerns his very interesting conversation with his father. At first, Freddie doubted that his brother's daughter had actually entered Artie Castle. It seems to be because of that teacher named Limerick, who graduated from the Academy of Geniuses. The young man agreed to become Arushi's mentor, although he could have easily refused it. But no matter how outstanding the mentor is, the child's exceptional abilities are essential. Before jumping to conclusions, Nocturne planned to meet with teacher Limerick in person. Suddenly, Freddie asks not to interfere, leaving the matter to its own devices. When the right moment comes, he himself is quite capable of talking to his father. After all, the matter of entering Arte is connected with Oscar, which is why Freddie asks for help. It would be very helpful if the secretary simply followed the instructions without doing anything extra. Mr. Freddie Savlon doesn't like it when someone interferes with his plans, changing everything in their own way. For Arushi, a lot becomes clear, except why Dad changed so drastically. Limerick had not seen such a joyful expression on the thoughtful girl's face for a long time. It seems like she has a real reason to rejoice now. She finally received an official letter about her acceptance into Arte Castle. Since Limerick had been invited to the Duke of Grant's house, it was an excellent opportunity to meet Madame. Lately, everything has been going surprisingly smoothly, as if someone was helping Arusha. She has finally been recognized as a full member of the Arty Castle, which opens up great prospects. Thanks to the magic dress, the girl's fame grew significantly, surpassing some stars. It could be said that for all of Arushi's past difficulties, she is now receiving a worthy reward. If this continues, she will not only gain useful information, but will also be able to secure support. Suddenly, strange people appear on their way, who have been waiting for the crew for a long time. If the lady wishes, Limerick can meet Mr. Shearman in person. This conversation never ended. The girl notices something strange during the trip. A second later, the carriage window shatters into pieces with a roar, narrowly missing the girl. The carriage was stopped immediately. The coachman would never have been able to escape pursuit. Seeing Teacher Limerick inside, the stranger demands that he not make any unnecessary movements. This face seems too familiar to him. The young man has obviously met the teacher somewhere. Zecht was sure that along with these two, there would be at least one bodyguard in the carriage. Realizing who their target is, Limerick insists that the girl does not belong to the Savlon family. However, he had better keep quiet and quickly take the girl outside if the teacher hoped to survive. Never in her life had Arusha felt such intense fear, with her life hanging by a thread. A few minutes later, a group of mercenaries interrogates the teacher, taking everyone out of the carriage. Only now, looking at the young man next to Zecht, does everything become clear. The manager of the studio was involved in the seizure of the cart, becoming the mercenaries' main informant. He insists that the girl is definitely Arusha Savlon, which means the teacher lied to them. If it weren't for this little brat, the underground workshop under Ruben's management would still be afloat. He is ready to go to the end, wanting to avenge the lost business. Limerick demands that the girl be left alone. She is just a child who wants to help other children. In response, Zecht assures that the baby is only briefly losing consciousness and they need her alive. But this does not concern the young teacher at all, because no one will pay for his life. Mercenaries always get rid of unnecessary witnesses, especially in such an important matter. After this, Zecht orders the girl to be put on a horse, and they should quickly return to the mansion. There is no doubt that people from the third minister's house took part in the attack. The house of Duke Nicholas does not forgive humiliation. They will do anything for blood feud. However, today something changes. Nicholas will find out about this much later. As Limerick bleeds next to the abandoned carriage, someone slowly approaches from the woods. Just a minute ago, the teacher was sure that they were alone here, but sometimes help comes unexpectedly. The bright magical light that flashed in the eyes clearly indicates magical affiliation. The strange thing is that the wizard is so young, as if he had not yet turned 8 years old. You can be sure that Crown Prince Elliot will not stand by and watch what happens. The trouble is that Arusha is in a dangerous position right now. After several hours of sleep, she gradually opens her eyes, regaining consciousness. Having come to her senses, the little girl remembers what happened, seeing 2 mercenaries in front of her. Oddly enough, Ruben was tied up just like her, becoming the mercenary boss's second captive. Zecht has no intention of tolerating idiots on his team who are incapable of handling a child. A second later, something happens before her eyes that the baby shouldn't look at. Because of that incident in the studio, the business will never be able to return to its previous track. But only a true tyrant is capable of beating his guilty employee so severely. Zecht notices that the girl has already come to her senses, although the sleeping pill should have taken longer to work. He slowly approaches his main captive, for whose capture a worthy reward has been promised. It is clear that after losing his business, he completely lost his mind. Zecht admits that when he looks at the girl, it's as if he's looking into the eyes of her negligent father. He will certainly be delighted to find out into whose hands his beloved daughter has fallen. However, when news of Arushi's disappearance reaches the Duke, the scoundrel will regret having been born at all.